Hi everyone, it's Esther here. For today's video, we're going to be telling you everything that you need to know about CASPER tests. So what is a CASPER test? It's actually pretty different from some of the other tests that I set for when I was applying to medical school. For example, the BMAT, the UCAT or the ISET. And I thought it would be interesting for me to share a bit about my experience with what the CASPER test was for people who are applying to Australia and New Zealand. So to say this again, the CASPER test was used when I was applying to the University of Western Australia in their direct pathway program for medicine. And during my year when it was COVID-19, I'm not sure whether this was a replacement for any of the other physical interviews, so don't treat this as a one and only test that you need to pass to get into medical school. But in today's video, I'm going to bring you through everything that you need to know about it and to ace your test in getting into Australia or New Zealand medical schools. Without further ado, let's get right into it. Okay, so we're going to jump right into it, and the first section I'm going to do is to give you an overview of what CASPER is aimed at doing, in the sense what is the end goal that CASPER is looking at, so that you study in a way that you reach what the examiners are trying to achieve for and not blindly do it. So unlike the ISET or the BMAT or the UCAT, where you could just run through practice papers, in fact the ISET didn't have much to it, but where you could actually familiarize yourself with scientific background knowledge and be used to some of the question types and answering techniques, the CASPER test is actually known as a bit more of a mature behavioral type of test, where you're actually trying to test how mature you are in terms of your the way you process information, in terms of how you handle situations, not only restricted to the medical field, but your personality types and traits, and how this will actually translate in everything that you're going to do within medicine. For example, actually the CASPER test is under a lot of time, that you're under a pressure cooker essentially, because there's several questions in a very short span of, if I'm not wrong, about 5 minutes, where you will be given a time to read an excerpt and answer and type their answers out in 3 different parts, so A, B, C, and you have to basically respond to this situation in a way that you would if this would actually happen to you. So I think the end result of the CASPER is really that the schools want to be able to differentiate and distinguish what a mature student actually is, and what potential doctor would look like. You know that you have to work under many stressful conditions, and you cannot always please both parties, right? It's very, very difficult to come up with a decision, but definitely one that is patient orientated and is centered on the patient itself, and having the effective communication skills to give this to direct this to your patients. I think this is something that the CASPER test is aiming at, and actually does it pretty well in terms of the variety of situations that it throws at you. The next thing, I think the end goal for CASPER is really seeing that you are still a student and you aren't a doctor yet, right? You haven't gone through the specialist training and all the rigor, the years of medical school. But I think the CASPER is also meant at looking at shedding light a little bit on the values and morals and the ethical principles that you hold very dear to your heart, because there will be many examples, there will be many situations that they give in the test, which actually is very, very difficult to weigh and balance, and it's really up to you to decide which is more important for you. What are the principles that you hold more strongly to, whether it's integrity or something else that may conflict each other at the same time. Balancing pros and cons between medical school and juggling them. Many of the times they actually give you scenarios that will deal with a lot of questions in a group project setting. For example, how you work with teammates, how you deal with people who are so-called slackers, or people who are snakes in the sense, who don't really like to submit their work, who do so in a very in a manner that you just don't like to be associated with. I think all these situations and how CASPER does it is that they really want you to think right on your feet. You don't really have the time to consider so directly what is reflected in your answers, actually what you are thinking, and in a sense also reflects what are the true principles that you hold very close to your heart. So I think these two are the main goals for what a CASPER test is really looking towards, and definitely in a way that is going to challenge you a lot, because if you haven't been familiar with doing a typing behavioral type of test and more familiar with the pure study techniques, I think CASPER is a pretty interesting test to look and to realize how actually schools are being a little bit more oriented towards wanting to see the outcome of the doctor, wanting to find the capabilities, the personalities that you have, knowing that whatever studies, the specialists, the training, all of these will eventually be built up with time. But yeah, so in conclusion, I think to summarize this section, the CASPER test really looks at people with a set of mature capabilities, a mindset, whether you're approaching personality types, whether you're approaching situations that may be very difficult to deal with, and how to think, how to respond to these when you're stressed, how to do these all immediately on the spot. Because when you respond to these situations without giving much of a time, it actually does reflect a lot of the beliefs that you hold close to your heart, and actually helps the schools to be able to better distinguish the people that they want, knowing that the years of studying all that, they will eventually, the knowledge that you studied will eventually build up time. But what you have in you inherently will not fade away, and will not be warped by many of the things that currently happen in society. So I think this test is really, really good, and bear in mind this end goal. Let's go into the third section. The first example that I have for a situational type question is, imagine in a sense you are a pilot and your colleague is also another pilot. He has walked in drunk from work, and he looks visibly and he walks in a very unsteady, unstable manner that makes him look as if he's intoxicated. He has a plane that he has to fly that very night, and the question asks you, what will you do? What will you approach? How will you approach this situation? So, give a bit of time to think, and I talk about some of the possible solutions or questions that can arise from this example. So definitely, in every sense, we want to remain objective and not jump too quick into situations if you don't have the full picture of it. I'll definitely recommend you in the first question that's likely to come up asking you what you will do directly to a situation, to say that you will remain non-judgmental and not jump to any conclusions, because it may be rather premature to do so, and the drink that and because you don't know what is a drink that your colleague drank, whether it was actually an alcoholic drink making him feel intoxicated or something else, it's also not right to judge someone's character before that. And the assignment that he may be taking, even stated in the question that the assignment is that day on, right? It's also important to find out many of the other details related to it. And the approach I would take is a non-confrontational one, meaning I will apologize for overhearing for hearing the situation and being willing to verify if this information was correct, whether the colleague did actually drink an alcoholic drink the night before or what, making him seem very intoxicated today, and if doing so, to take the necessary measure. In short, if you realize how I approach this situation, the CASPER test doesn't like you to give so-called factual, seemingly textbook answer questions. You actually have to seem as non-biased and non-judgmental as you can, and definitely offer ways in which you can approach the situation should the result be different. For example, if your colleague did admit to you that this happened, what is the next necessary steps that you would take is to encourage him to report it to a senior colleague, and to definitely not fly the plane, right? Because otherwise that would be very dangerous to other passengers and risk the safety of other people. Or if this actually was something that you misheard and you heard this information incorrectly, definitely for you to apologize and to see what the necessary help perhaps that you could offer to your colleague. Another very, very famous example that actually can be brought up is actually more medical related. For example, we can say patient's diagnosis went wrong, and actually it was a medical officer, or rather it was a junior doctor who made a mistake. You are a senior doctor, and as a senior doctor, what will you do in this situation? How will you explain to the parents and to the family members what happened to this patient? Again, approaching it from a manner which you can admit to your own faults, and to understand the full picture in mind. You as a senior doctor should firstly definitely apologize for the mistake that your junior doctor made, whether it is caused by whether it's caused directly or indirectly. Avoid confrontation with the patients, but also explain the situation very clearly to fully inform the family members and to account for the patient's safety. Knowing that in medicine, everything that you do is really for the good of the patient, it's very important to be completely transparent and honest with each and every procedure that you're taking, and to get the patient consent. A question which may ask you to, or which may probe a little bit of the values you have drawn from some of the questions that I took previously. So for example, in the event that you actually one of your family members passed away and so happens to have the funeral the next day, you as a guy, you are involved in many school activities, and you so happen to have a very important basketball match that next day, and you are the captain of the team. Perhaps you are the one that usually scores the most number of goals, and you know that this is the finals for your school, and if you do not represent your school, it's likely that you all will not be able to maintain perhaps the winning streak that you have in your school. How do you balance these two? I would say that there's no direct correct or wrong answer, because either way, choosing going to a funeral or supporting your loved ones, your family, supporting people who are closest to you, or choosing to attend a basketball match and doing a school proud, either way, there are so many sets of people that are relying on you, and these are very important factors to consider when you're making a decision. I think what the CASPER test looks at is actually you trying to verbalize a decision in a written way, and helping them to see how they will approach the situation if they were in your shoes. So that is for situational. Okay, so for the next type of question, we said that type 2 questions is actually a policy type of question. So maybe dealing with current events in the world, whether it's having a good awareness of the ethical moral principles, whether it's of situations, whether it's of professionalism, especially in medicine, in very professional degrees, in social media, in juggling all these things that may possibly affect your career, in demonstrating your knowledge and awareness of it, and at the same time your breadth of knowledge around the issue, and perhaps also admit that even if I don't do that, I would take the necessary actions to familiarize myself with these. A reasoning process is definitely very important to bring out the pros and cons of each and everything that you are discussing about, and some of the for and against in every principle. To give you a bit more concrete examples, they may be talking about cannibalism, they may be talking about immigration, or for example immigration exiles, or even refugee crisis, and things that are very difficult for you to actually give an opinion of at your age. I definitely acknowledge this, and very challenging, hot, and potentially divisive questions will actually come out in this category. Long-standing conflicts, for example, giving you what is your opinion of people, speaking of vulgarities, what is your opinion of policies related to so and so. And for me, in vulgarities, I think I take this very seriously in the sense that while I respect the opinions of other people, I think it's also important to understand that not everyone likes to be treated in a particular way, and to give your own stance and to justify it, but also at the same time acknowledge that there may be many different sides of the story that you may be dealing with. A policy type question is definitely a bit more harder to grasp in terms of the actual tangibleness of it as compared to situational type of question. For the last type of question we see is actually a personal question. So this is perhaps one which your personal voice will actually stand out the most, and it's the easiest for you to show the examiners who you are as a person, your character. So they will ask you things like, give me an example where you have failed or succeeded, and this is usually in part C of the question. Part A and B will usually be related to the situation or to the particular prompt that they have given you, and part C is usually related to your own personal lives, or the entire question ABC may also be related to personal. So yeah, it depends on what kind of questions you get, but generally reflection kind of question, who you want to be, showing yourself how you have grown through the past few years, what is a challenge that you have overcome. Give me an example of dealing with a friendship that was very difficult to be reconciled with. An example of when you have failed so miserably, an example of when you've had the courage to do certain things, really thrown you a lot of the values that will be reflected in you personally. And so that is the third type of question. Okay, so there's actually something very small that I wanted to point out in personal question types when you're trying to answer success or failure questions. I think there was actually a lot of time where I asked myself, what is a kind of failure that can show off myself, that can reflect as someone who is still human in a sense, and definitely a failure that doesn't seem too insignificant, or there's never something that is too big or too insignificant to say in medical school interviews or questions, except to remember to definitely be honest and to not, in a sense, overstep your boundaries in that aspect. So for example, when I was talking about failures, definitely don't mention a failure that is going to kill you or that is going to wipe you out immediately from an interview. For example, don't mention you have you have a problem with dealing with drugs or alcohol, these are things that some schools take very seriously, some universities really abhor, or don't mention things that will really in a sense make your studying make this process of getting it very challenging by saying you do not have the right study techniques like laziness or time management, or things that are very difficult for to be a practicing doctor, because you really need a lot of self-discipline, you need a lot of hard work, right? Really seeing the balance and understanding these two, and seeing a failure that's actually personal to you in the sense that you can relate to it, your personal voice, for example. There's even a failure of felt that you didn't give yourself the space and opportunity to grow as an individual in your high school when you were focusing a little bit more on academics, for example, rather than making yourself a well-rounded person, like doing more extracurricular activities or serving the community and all these. Try to give failures like examples of these that will make yourself look like you are someone, even though you have lots of good traits, but you also have things to work and improve on, and you're not a perfect being, which is not what they want to see in medical school. You don't need to be a perfect person to enter it, and definitely there's going to be a lot of things that you're going to be working on in the next couple of years, but they want to see at least a trait of you that is special, that is unique to you, that is going to last you through medical school. So some of the other personal type of questions that they can usually do, or that you can give in a way which really will convince people. Okay, so some of the question types of personal questions, actually I would strongly suggest you to reflect and to think about many of the experiences that you've gone through, whether in secondary school, whether in high school, in your events outside of school, in the extracurriculars, in your service, towards society, and many of the small nitty-gritty details that you may have done, which may have contributed, which may have convinced you to choose medicine and choose pursuing a medical degree as a potential field, even though knowing the challenges amongst it. I think these are some of the potential situations that you can actually share about, and it's going to reflect a lot of yourself personally. It's going to be something that someone else doesn't have, and that's what makes your test so different, right? They may even be asking you questions like, how do you make difficult decisions? What are some of your strategies for managing conflicting demands? How do you choose? When was the time when you actually chose not to help someone, even though you could have had the capacity to do so? When was the time that you sacrificed something to accomplish a goal? And all these, I think these are very precious things that are going to reflect to you more than anything else in your CASPER test and in typing them out. Okay, so to summarize in this video, currently we have looked at the end goals of CASPER, what is aimed at, the purpose of this before you even enter medical school as a practitioner, to look at some of the values that you hold, whether it's ethical or moral, or some of the judgment and decision making skills that you have. We also look at some of the question types, mainly being situational, policy type, and personal questions, and lastly giving you some examples of them. So I hope this video has been very helpful to you, and please comment below. I think I'll be making another video shortly on general tips for CASPER, because this has been really long so far, and I hope I don't bore you out. Please continue to support this channel, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye bye.